Republicans on this bill. Oklahoma Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin. And Senator, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Look, Senate Republican leaders cleared the first major hurdle last night, passed that key procedural vote. I know there's still a long way to go here before making it to President Trump's desk, in theory, by July 4th. But based on where you are in the process right now, do you see that timeline as realistic?
Oh, absolutely. We will, I know you mentioned earlier in your show that we have 20 hours of debate. It won't be full 20 hours. The Democrats will take 20 hours. We'll probably take 2. That means we'll start the bill anywhere between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning, Monday, this coming morning. And then we'll just stay on it. Vote-a-rama is a no holds bar amendment process, meaning that you can put as many amendments on, but you can't ever quit voting. You got to continue moving. And when everybody wears down, then vote-a-rama stops. So I feel like we'll probably go through Monday evening, maybe into Monday night. Then we'll give we'll do the final passage on one big beautiful bill, send it to the House, and they'll probably vote on it maybe Wednesday or Thursday, and be at the president's desk by Friday, July 4th.
If only it was that simple. We'll watch for that. We'll watch for that timeline.
It sounds that simple, but there's a lot of there's a lot of work to do between that. Yeah. But we've been working like this since September because we knew we were going to win the election. And in November, we got a mandate by the American people. They wanted a different government. They wanted a different direction than what the Biden administration took us, and that's what we're doing. We're delivering for the American people.
And, one of the dynamics we've been watching, Republican Senator Ron Johnson, for example, he's had concerns about how the bill would affect the national deficit. He told reporters yesterday after the vote that he and others on a similar deficit pursuit had worked out a deal on an amendment that would further cut Medicaid, but he wouldn't say whether he would back the final bill if that amendment isn't adopted. So do you have any details on that deal, and where do negotiations stand with some of these lawmakers who are on the fence about backing a final bill depending on their specific amendments, like Johnson?
Yeah, so this is common, right? We have a lot of people with a lot of opinions, and we're good with that. Everybody wants to make this bill better, and we're okay with that because there is no perfect bill that's ever come out of Congress. This is a very good bill. It definitely moves us in the right direction and gets America back on track and pushes forward that American first agenda. But at the same time, when you have an idea or you have an amendment, you got to get the votes for it. And we got to pass a bill that'll get 51 votes on the Senate floor and get the magic number in the House. We usually say 218, but last time they passed it with 215. So whatever we can do to improve the bill, we'll do it. But at the end of the day, it's all about the votes. It's about counting the votes. So Ron Johnson has worked very hard. He's been very passionate. He's made great improvements already on the bill, and I believe maybe if we can pass this amendment, we can even do a little bit better. And if you talk about what details are on it, we're still looking at that amendment because we have to make sure it passes the Byrd rule. So it's not finalized yet.
And, just to get to the core of Senator Johnson's concerns here, the Congressional Budget Office put out their analysis of the Senate version of the bill today. Their latest estimates that it would add nearly $3.3 trillion to the deficit over a decade. I mean, how do you begin to address some of Senator Johnson's concerns, or even some from your constituents who say, well, hey, I want you to send that number in the opposite direction?
Well, we are sending in the opposite direction. What this reflects is CBO saying that making tax cuts permanent will add to the deficit. But they also said this in 2017. They said that the tax cuts we put in 2018 would cause a $150 billion deficit over 10 years. And what happened by 2019, by the end of 2019, we actually completely reversed that and saw a surplus of $150 billion. They're saying the same thing here. If we make it permanent, not 10 years, but we make it permanent, that's where the biggest part of the deficit spending is. What's interesting to me is that the Democrats are actually complaining about tax cuts that we actually know will add a surplus, because when we invest in our own backyards, it seems like it's spent better and it reinvests rather than when we send it to the black hole up here in Washington, D.C. But if you remember the Build Back Better bill, it didn't do anything with taxes, and it cost $3 trillion, and it's still sitting out there just costing the American taxpayers and has done nothing to improve the economy.
Well, I will say, yeah, Democrats and Republicans have spent alike and contributed to the deficit in different portions. And I will say some of the analyses that have watered down, I guess, the CBO analysis does rely on, I think, the American economy growing at a rate that I think the White House is very optimistic about GDP growing over 4%, for example, but
Right.
some other analyses have that a little, I mean, I would say much lower, around 1% or so. So I guess, are you...
Omar, remember
Yeah.
too, we're cutting $1.6 trillion in deficits spending. That's the largest cut ever in American history. $1.6 trillion we're cutting in in deficits. And so that's huge for us. We're moving in the right direction. If we continue down this path, if we continue to see President Trump's economy come back with a roar of a lion, which is what's happening right now, we continue to see the job reports continue to climb the way they are right now. We see the growth in our GDP. Then what we're going to see is in 2.5 years, possibly, we could have a balanced budget for the first time since '96.
Consumer spending a little down as well, but I hear your point on the overall economy. It is in a good place right now as far as where it's it's moving. I want to ask about the American Hospital Association, because you talked about some of the cuts we're looking at here. Obviously, Medicaid central in this, but the American Hospital Association warning that these cuts to Medicaid could undermine the ability of hospitals across America to provide critical services to everyone. And look, one of Senator Tom Tillis's concerns here was that dynamic. North Carolina, like Oklahoma, has more than 1 in 5 residents on Medicaid or child health insurance programs. And the CBO, I know we're talking about it a lot, estimates the Senate version of the bill here would affect almost 12 million by 2034. I know you've talked about the focus of these cuts, getting rid of the, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse. But how do you ensure these cuts don't undermine access to health care for all Oklahomans, especially those in rural areas?
So I'm very rural. I was raised on a ranch where my kids were raised. Our biggest grocery store is Harps, and it's small, and the best convenience store we have is Casey's, and that's the only stoplight we have in town. And so I appreciate rural hospitals. I understand they're a backbone of our economy, but I also understand what Medicaid was designed for. Medicaid was designed for those in need. We have 35 million people right now that live below the poverty line. However, we have 70 million people roughly signed up for Medicaid. Ever since Obamacare, we've seen Medicaid explode, and we've had a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse take root inside a system that was designed for those that need it the most. I heard a while ago you talking about the work requirement. Okay, so what the work requirement does is it requires an able-bodied individual with no dependents and no sickness to work, volunteer, or go to school 20 hours a week. And then the paperwork that you guys were talking about, instead of having to prove your means once a year, it says you got to prove it every 6 months.
6 months.
Now,
yeah.
I'm sorry, but that is not a burden. That is just lazy if you're not willing to do that. And if you're not willing to work 20 hours a week or volunteer 20 hours a week or go to school 20 hours a week to try to better yourself, why is it up to the American taxpayer to pay for you not willing to help yourself? Medicaid was designed to help those in need when they needed it the most. And that's what we're trying to preserve Medicaid for. We're trying to make sure it's there for those in need.
I will say part of Senator Josh Hawley's concern, and he cited a woman who wrote to him. She explained that her husband works as a carpenter. Their private insurance covers her, 4 of her kids, but her 5th kid has a brain condition that is under Medicaid at this point. And to her, she's worried that she'll be one of the people that slips through the cracks. I hope you're right. I hope she is not one of those folks, but there is real concern about that. Before we go, because I know you got to go, I want to ask about your colleague, Senator Tom Tillis's decision to not run for re-election. Obviously, he was one of the Republican nays last night. And look, as soon as that happened, President Trump was quick on social media, threatening to primary him. And my question to you is just from where I sit, does it concern you that the dynamic seems to be do what the president says or he's going to threaten you at the primary?
No, there's a whole lot more to that story, which we don't have time to get in there. But
I got time. I don't know.
I don't have time though.
Okay.
Because,
all right.
But I'll just tell you, there's a lot more behind the scenes that you're not seeing there. However, Tom Tillis is a guy that served North Carolina well. I consider him a friend. We may not agree on every issue, but that's why I get along with those on both sides of the aisle too. We don't have to agree to necessarily be friends, because sometimes you can agree to disagree. However, the decision for him not to run run was solely his decision. If he wanted to take on North Carolina and in the decision to not support the one big beautiful bill, which I believe North Carolina supported President Trump overwhelmingly all 3 times, that probably would have been a tough road to haul. But however, if he chose to run, I would commend him for it, but he chose not to. And that doesn't reflect President Trump's threatening. That just reflects a whole lot more information that's not being out in the public.
All right, Senator, I'm going to have to take your word for it on that front, but if you get time for that story, give us a call. Senator Mark Wayne Mullin, appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.